Welcome to the podcast. We're going to read into the world of the independent bookseller, books and the authors that write them, and the publishing industry more broadly. I'm interested to see the quirky ways that quirky creatives make a living in a world that Amazon is disrupting. I'm A.B. Frank, and this is the Bookish Report. Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the Bookish Report podcast. And in this one we'll be learning about navigating the poetry industry with Andrew McMillan. Now, Andrew's an award-winning poet, a playwright, and the senior lecturer on creative writing at Manchester Metropolitan University. I met him at Todmorden Book Festival in 2019, and learning that he was the patron of the festival, I quickly got in touch to try and arrange this interview with him. And he thought that we might only get a few minutes for an interview, and that's better than nothing, so we arranged a date and time. But fortunately we did get a good half an hour to do a full interview. And in that we speak about how he started out in the industry as a poet. We talk about poetry collections and pamphlets and full collections and what the industry considers a full collection. We speak about how awards can help a career and what he recommends new authors do in regards to awards. And we speak about how he uses his agent. We speak about his full-time job at the university and what that entails. He also talks about the themes in his writing and his creative process, which is quite fascinating. And we talk about the poetry market, market growth, and sort of the limitations that poetry being taught in schools has. And then we do speak about the book festival. And also, we speak about what industry publication Andrew would recommend and what he gets from reading the website. So here's the interview. Enjoy. So can you tell us a bit about yourself, like before you became a poet, an award-winning poet, I should say?
Yes, I mean, it was never something I wanted to do, and so the kind of open secret about me is that my dad's a poet as well, and so that I grew up in a house that was full of contemporary poetry, which is a really rare thing, and something that I know is a real privilege and very few kids have, and so it was just around. And so it wasn't that I ever wanted to be a poet, but I knew what it was, or I could sort of see it as a thing that somebody did, which I think is what a lot of kids don't get. And then for a long time, because whatever your parents do, even if they were James Bond when you were a teenager, is the most embarrassing thing. So for a while I wanted to be a politician, I wanted to be an actor, and then it was poetry that always kind of pulled me back in, really. And so when I was 16, 17, I started trying to do it kind of semi-properly, as it were, and it just went from there, really.
What were you doing then in those earlier days to succeed as a poet? I think I did see a video you did for the Northern Writers Awards where you talked about submitting little bits and pieces to magazines.
Yeah, like there's kind of like poetry is interesting because I think there is a real trajectory to it, or there was when I started out, which is that you would send off individual poems to poetry magazines or competitions, and poetry magazines like the coal face of poetry, like they're the thing where new poetry is happening. And then what happens is, you get into a small little magazine or you win a competition and you get 20 quid, but then the important thing that happens off the back of that is that they invite you to read at the launch of the magazine, or they say, will you come and read at this prize giving thing?
Oh, that's what you see when people are reading their poetry.
Yeah, and so you just begin to get practice at that, and then the more that you get in magazines, and then eventually go, I might have a pamphlet now. Maybe a pamphlet seems like a good idea. A pamphlet almost being like the EP before the full album.
That's literally the next little sub-question I've got there, because you did say on that video, I think, or another thing I've read on your website, you got 3 pamphlets done with a Newcastle publisher.
Yeah.
What are they in the poetry world then?
To me, it's like that EP. It's like that kind of thing of going, they're like a calling card, really. People are kinder about pamphlets. There is, and not necessarily for all positive reasons, a massive weight put on a first collection. That if it kind of sinks without a trace, it's very, very hard to kind of claw back a readership from that. Whereas pamphlets, people are, it's just, I was treated really well by my publisher, but it almost kind of doesn't matter like who publishes them. I don't think you're fine. Yeah. Go for it. I don't think it matters who publishes them necessarily. I don't think it matters who where they're coming from, but it's just like a business card. It's something after you've done that reading at the open mic night or something like that, and someone goes, I liked that stuff. I'd love to read more of their stuff. It's a way of just giving them a bit of that, I think.
Yeah. Is it something that you carry around yourself, or is it formally published?
Formally but I mean, I
piece
think...
of, mini piece of work then.
Yeah, so they're stapled oftentimes. They're about 24 pages long. But I think in many ways you could self-publish them. I don't think it matters necessarily, but they're just a stepping stone towards a first book before you're kind of ready to do a first book, I think. And for me, just a way of trying out different things. So I did 3. And all of them were kind of in different styles, and it was me sort of trying stuff out and things like that, and just seeing what worked or didn't work, I guess.
Did you do those 3 like together, or were they separate over like a course of?
Yeah, like 2 years in between them all. So it was
okay.
So there was a lot of. It felt like 2 years felt like a nice kind of span of time as well. And I mean, it's interesting. Pamphlets more and more becoming popular with very established poets who want to do something kind of in between, but books take a long time to write. Obviously. And so there's something about kind of going, I could do a pamphlet in between 2 books as just a kind of stepping stone towards something, I think.
So they were about 24 pages and maybe or so?
Yeah.
What would be the typical length of a poetry book then, or your poetry books?
So the best way to think about this is there's some poetry prizes where people submit their books to, and their definition of poetry is, I think, a book that's 48 pages at least. So that's generally kind of what we think of as like a full-length book. But generally mine are about, I think, 60-ish pages. Mine are quite short, quite slim. So 60-ish pages normally, so it's not, compared to a novel where you think I've got 200 pages, like it seems something very small, but they can't, because of the concentration of language, like it takes the same amount of thought somehow. But the kind of end result is always just slightly slimmer.
So you're now an award-winning poet.
It's true.
It's true. What awards have you won?
You're going to make me list them. I mean, the big one that changed everything was the Guardian First Book Award, which is now not an award anymore, because I think what happened was I drank so much free wine at the event that I bankrupted the prize. But it's been around for sort of 10, 15 years. People like Zadie Smith have won it. He always went to novelists. The poet had never won it. And so when I won it in 2015, what that really meant was that people that wouldn't normally buy poetry would pick up my book in the same way that I will go and buy the Booker Prize winner, whatever it is, because I'm not into novels as much.
Yeah.
And so it just really opened that door for me. It won poetry prizes, but they didn't necessarily do as much, I don't think, in terms of sales, because I think in poetry it's such a small world. People have already made their mind up whether they kind of want to buy it or not. I mean, the other ones that were very generous were New Writing North, who did the Northern Writers Awards, and the Society of Authors as well, who are kind of a great organisation that just give out money to writers quite a lot.
That sounds all right.
That's all right, isn't it? That'll do.
What's the process of then putting yourself in a position to be considered for an award like that then?
So I mean, some of them, your publisher just submits the book. Because it reflects better on the publisher if it wins something and things like that. It helps their sales, and so you're kind of trapped in that marketing cycle with that. On the other side, with things like the Northern Writers Award, you just apply when you're kind of ready, and when you've got something that you think you need a bit of space, a bit of money to kind of help fund. And the Society of Authors as well give out awards to young poets called the Eric Gregory Awards for poets under 30, which are really great. And something called the Somerset Maugham Awards that are for travel. You meant to spend them on travelling. I think I bought clothes with mine, but you meant to spend it on travel. And things like that where, we don't have necessarily what America has, which is, because we used to have more of a kind of welfare state in this country. So America has massive philanthropic giving from vastly rich, wealthy dynastic families. Whereas it seems to me that we have... we just have kind of a lot more state support, I think, for writers, which has been... So that's been really good, and I've just been able to benefit from that. And we should have more. We should have more prizes, I think. But.
Yeah, because I'm not aware of too many, but I've not looked into it that much. But at the early stage that I'm in, I think it's something that I should be looking at now.
I think so, and I think certainly those awards for works in progress, I think, are really important.
Yeah, because that's something that's new to me that I didn't quite know until I read you'd won these.
So there's there's the awards for works in progress, and then there's the ones that your publisher will submit you to after you've been published, after the books come out, and they do two very separate things. Book prizes really are for booksellers because they sell more books.
Yeah.
So the Booker Prize really is about booksellers.
Yeah.
It's about giving some money to one writer, but really it's about book sales because anything that's shortlisted sells more copies. People buy it. Whereas work in progress prizes are much more valuable to writers. I think the other side of it, the actual book prizes are much more just for booksellers. I think.
Yeah, so that one for work in progress gives the writer themselves some confidence and validation in what they're doing and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
that's it. And just I think because when we start out, writing's a really lonely thing, and I know that's a cliche, but it is. You show your friends and they have to like it, or you show your family and they have to like it. But for someone else to come in, oftentimes, an established writers judge. I judge a lot of stuff now. You kind of judge things, and that validation of someone going, no, this is worth it, this is good, this is worth sticking with, that can make the difference for people who, writing mainly is just rejections, people telling you it's not good enough and things like that, and someone to come along and go, no, it is good enough, here's some money that makes, that will help you finish it. I just think that can be a really valuable thing, and it was for me.
Could be the difference between someone who is a talented writer putting something down and pursuing a different career
I think so, and I think
to finishing it and getting it over the line.
Yeah, and it's interesting, there are a lot of statistics around men are much more likely to submit for these prizes than women are. Just due to things like confidence and kind of bravado, men will always think they're going to win, and women kind of tend to demur from that kind of thing stereotypically. But the biggest hurdle is to put yourself forward. Yeah. And that's scary. A lot of people never get to that stage. A lot of very talented writers never submit because they think it's easier if you don't, because you can never be critiqued, and your work, you can just believe that your work is good enough.
And a writer might be more introverted and take that criticism a bit.
Exactly, and it's hard not to, because you've invested your life into it, and whether it's an autobiographical piece or not, it's very, very hard to separate criticism of yourself from criticism of the work, and that's only something that you learn through time. There's no recipe for that, I don't think. In evolutionary terms, we're just hardwired to remember bad things, not good things. So I remember all my negative reviews. I could quote them line by line. I forget everything anyone's ever said that's nice. But because when we were kind of cave people, if someone goes, that waterhole's poisoned, that's more useful to us than saying that place over there is nice. It's better to kind of remember. It's better to remember the negative things from our evolutionary.
Survival,
so it's just
yeah.
inbuilt. Pardon?
Survival.
Yeah, survival. It's survival, and so it's just hardwired into us in a really strange way.
Does having an award carry some sort of like weight and authority, like having the title best-selling author?
I mean, again, I think only to booksellers. It makes the next book easier to sell. Yeah. It means that people read it in a different way. When the first book came out, I was really lucky. It won these things. It got a lot of attention. And that meant that the second book, whether it was better or worse, was always going to still be reviewed in the national newspapers. It was going to have a presence in bookshops. So that's what it does. Yeah. And aside from just giving you a nice lump sum of money, that's the real use that it has. It just gets you through a certain door where people will take it. The work, it's interesting because my work hasn't got, in between my first and second book, the work hasn't got dramatically better. Like, you hope you get better as you keep going, but it's not. I'm not suddenly a much better writer, but the work is read in a different way, because the outside validation of a prize suddenly makes people go, oh well. It's like the same if a film gets an Oscar and you didn't like it the first time, think, oh, I should probably watch that again.
Yeah, it must be good.
Yeah, it must be good if it's kind of got that. So there's that kind of sense of it, really, that people still trust these kind of outside forces to validate things. In the same way, I read try and read across a range of contemporary poetry, but in novels I read a lot of new fiction, but I would always trust what the Booker Prize said was good. Yeah. Because I'm not up on fiction, so I just trust them. Whereas in poetry, I can make my own decisions. But I think it's the same for prizes, that people look at it and go, oh well, if it's got a prize, it must be good, and that's not necessarily a good thing. But I think that's what it can do.
Would it help the writer in the early stages with the work in progress to get a deal in the first place, or to get speaking gigs or something like that?
It works differently across art forms. So in poetry, there's no real point in having an agent in poetry because there's no money in it. So agents don't want 10% of nothing, essentially. There's no advances in poetry. It sells very little. Even best-selling poetry sells 6,000 or 7,000 copies. Like, it's not a kind of massive thing. In prose, it helps to have the agent to sell the book. But it helps to have the book finished before you get the agent. So the kind of process would be to have part of it ready as a synopsis and a few chapters to send out. But then when the agent emails back and goes, yes, we love this, send me all, you have to be ready to send it all, because otherwise you kind of lose that chance. And so I think a lot of people jump the gun and want to be published too quickly before it's ready. Then, of course, being taken on by an agent is just the start of another massive process of being edited, of being rejected by publishers and things like that. It's not it's just the first stage of something else. Yeah. But the more experience you get standing up, reading out, sending stuff out to magazines and things like that, it's all just good practice, I think.
That was literally the next question, is do you have an agent?
Yes, but not for... so I have an agent for like speaking engagements now, just because my diary was getting too mad to manage myself. So somebody that can have those awkward conversations for you about like fees and stuff like that, and when they say, well, we'll pay you 20 pence and we'll put you up in a barn and you have to pay your own travel, and then you go, someone else steps in and goes, oh no, actually maybe you should be treated slightly better than that. But then also for other projects that I'm working on, so kind of non-fiction and fiction, you need an agent just to be able to sell it, and it's just nice to be looked after, really. I did it for about 10 years on my own, and a lot of my life was just admin. It's just answering emails, like, you know, to do one reading.
The nitty-gritty bits.
Yeah, to do one reading takes an exchange of 10 emails, and then you have to go home knackered and invoice them.
Yeah,
and
I've not helped trying to arrange
well,
it.
no, but this is fine. You know, stuff like this is really fun, and actually what an agent is also really good at is saying no to stuff you don't want to do, but you don't want to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
And just, you know, I wrote a play very recently that's been touring, and the agent was really great for that, because it's not a world I know anything about, but they know that there's experts within the agency that can look after that and make sure that I'm not being mistreated or making sure that everything's as it should be. So I recommend any publisher that's telling you not to get an agent is a dodgy publisher. Agents are there as your representatives to fight for you, to fight your battles against the publisher.
Yeah, they understand the contract, don't they?
They understand the contract. Like, the legalese of writing contracts baffles me still, in terms of like what you're meant to get, the kind of percentages of royalties and things like that. Like, when I first signed the book I was so excited when I got the book deal for the first poetry collection. I would have signed anything, and you know, I've been treated really well in many ways. But be suspicious of people that tell you not to get an agent.
My A-level law teacher said that lawyers and agents and stuff they get paid to make normal language into legalese.
Sound fancy.
Come at the other end and be normal language again.
It's true.
How did you get your agent then?
Well, he in fact approached me because I never wanted one. Like I say, because for poetry there's no point. Like, I've got a really good relationship with my editor. I sort of send him stuff every so often. I'm with the best publisher I could be with. I get as much money from them as I think is possible to get, like, because it's poetry. And I was just introduced to him one night, and he was really keen to represent me. And so the deal that we kind of came up with was that I would keep the poetry for myself, because there's no point. And again, there's no money in it for him. If he takes 12.5% of what I earn, but that's like 12.5% of nothing in poetry, so there's no point.
Yeah.
So what I said to him was, I need someone to do my gigs for me and do my bookings for me. And then the kind of trade-off of that, not the trade-off, but the expectation then is that I begin to expand and think about writing other things that he can then sell. So it was kind of a mutual approach, really. I was ready for someone to look after me, and he was keen to represent me and sort of build. He's got 2 or 3 poets on his list now, which is good.
And have you got some sort of criteria then that you would need to have met before you'd say yes to a deal?
To an agent?
No, to like a gig or something like that.
In terms of like what I want,
a publishing deal.
I mean, in terms of like gigs and stuff, I tend to weigh it up against like how far it is. I mean, this sounds like really glib, but stuff like how far it is away, whether I actually really want to do it, whether there seems much point in doing it, and genuinely what the money is. Because, you know, sometimes like in June I'll get emailed and it'll say, do you want to come to like Weymouth at the start of December and we'll give you 50 quid. And like in June I'm really happy because it's summer and I'm feeling good, and I think, yeah, that sounds amazing. And then I know that December will roll around and I think, why am I doing this? And by the time, and it's freezing cold and it's dark at 3 o'clock, and by the time you pay the tax on what you're earning, there's really no point in you doing it. So I mean, now, you know, I work for Todmorden Book Festival for free as part of my patronage of the festival and things like that, so I still do a lot of stuff like that. But for now, for me, for gigs, it would be, is it somewhere that I've been recently? Is it somewhere that I think I'd enjoy going? Is it somewhere that I want to go? Because, I mean, I work full-time at university as well, so oftentimes this kind of stuff is on weekends. And so is it worth me losing a weekend to go and do something? And are they going to pay me what I kind of would want to be paid, I guess? Which sounds really mercenary, but that's the sort of stage that...
But again, if you're full-time, like you're doing something at the university, you this is like your work that you're doing outside of there, and that would eat into that time, wouldn't it?
That's the thing. So it's like, you know, there's only so many times I can sort of abandon my boyfriend to like weekends alone and things unless it's to earn some money or to do something genuinely interesting or exciting. So it's really just, you know, I just want to do stuff I enjoy doing. And for a long time I was full-time freelance, and those decisions aren't possible. So I was doing stuff because the full-time freelance, you just say yes to whatever someone offers you because you're terrified no one's ever going to offer again.
Yeah.
I'm in a really lucky position that, so I have a full-time job at university. I can pick and choose much more about what I say yes to or no to. And that took a long time. That took like 10 years to get to. But it just means that I don't have to slog my guts out doing things I don't really enjoy if that's not kind of what mood I'm in. And that's been really nice.
Yeah, it's a good position to be in.
Yeah, I'm incredibly lucky. God, I'm really lucky.
Yeah. So, your books then,
Yes.
physical and
Playtime.
What would you say your work's about? Does it have any themes running through it?
So it tends to be like just about kind of masculinity, sexuality and class, and sort of where those three things kind of sit together, really. So it started off just being about, the sort of mission of it was this notion that all poetry throughout history is just men looking at women without their permission and writing about them. And what happens if you turn a male gaze on other men? So not necessarily in a homosexual way, but just a kind of a male gaze on other men, what happens? And then explore that kind of fragility, I guess. And so both, but physical and then playtime's much more about my own childhood. So it's almost like a prequel to the first book in a way. That's kind of how I think about it. They're very much part of the same project, I think.
Yeah. You said in that video for the Northern Writers Awards, you do a lot of your first lines. Just walking about, or sat somewhere. Is that just observing and waiting for something to come to you?
Like I can't sit at a desk and write. Like I find that impossible.
Yeah.
So it just more and more got to a point where I turn it over in my head for a long time. I like to once I sit down at a desk, I want it almost to all come as the first draft quite quickly.
Yeah.
So there's a sense in which I sort of try and write it in my head a bit first, and then once it's ready to kind of tip out like water from a jug, then it kind of goes onto the page quite quickly, and that's just a way of getting over my own frustration at not being able to write very quickly. I write very slowly. I'm a bad writer. I can't sit at a desk. I think to write a novel you have to sit at a desk and write. Poetry, like I've been writing these essays.
I've got a stand.
Oh, nice. That's a good idea.
I'm not hunched over.
That's a good idea.
So I didn't get one of those sit-stand desks where you can alter the height, but I got another stand from the laptop to go on.
I see, that's a good idea. Because most time I think, like when I was writing the play or when I've been doing this non-fiction stuff, training myself to sit at a desk like 9 to 5 is difficult. Like I've got very bad concentration. Poetry happens around the corners of my own life somehow, in a much easier way, I think.
When you go to like have a little walkabout or sit somewhere in public, do you have an idea of what you're trying to write, or does that tell you what to write?
It's not necessarily that I'm sort of being inspired by what I'm seeing. It's just that you sort of you've got a line in your head already from wherever it comes from, wherever these ideas come from, and you're just almost like taking it for a walk somehow. Like you're just walking like you would a dog. You're kind of giving it some exercise and seeing what legs it's got, and that might be a process that takes like a month or 2 months just to find out what it really wants to be about, I guess.
So your dad's a poet as well. Did he give you any guidance or teaching about how to?
Not really. Like I've always gone my own way. It was just that it was that ability to see, that ability to kind of see that it was a thing. I did a lot of work in schools when I was first starting out, and that notion that people still think poets are a very rarefied thing. They're kind of in ivory towers, they've got long beards and white hair and they're old and things like that. And just to grow up seeing a model of a poet as a physical thing, that was the important thing. And that was the rare thing. Most people have to kind of figure it out for themselves as they sort of go along.
Yeah.
Which is more difficult.
Because until I put myself in the book circles and doing things like this, I didn't think poetry had a big sort of market, but there seems to be loads of people doing it.
Much more people writing it than reading it, which is difficult. So there's kind of like if everybody that wrote it read it, we'd all be millionaires. So more people write it than buy it. But the market share's increased by about sort of 15-20%, I think, recently. So more young people buy poetry now, but it's still a very niche part of the kind of book sale percentages.
It's not something that I ever remember being pushed towards. We did it at school in English, but
I mean, the way it's taught in schools is difficult, because the way it's taught in schools is that you go, this poem's really good, and if you don't think it is, you've not understood it. So let's read it again. Let's read a line each as we go around the class. And what you're never given permission in schools is to not like something. You can't like all poetry. I don't like all poetry. I hate some poetry. But why would you think that you had to like all poetry? Like, it seems such a strange thing to me. But that's the way it's taught in schools often, or was when I was there.
Yeah. So we're at Todmorden Book Festival now.
Yeah.
What's your involvement with that?
So they asked me to be, it's the first year of it last year. they asked me to be patron, which just really involves giving a little speech at the opening night, and just helping them program it, really, kind of helping them reach out to authors that I might know that they might want to book and things like that. And just being a kind of face for it, really. So I've just done a workshop today to help raise some money for the festival. Everyone always likes to come do a writing workshop, so that's been nice. With a view to then the money from that going back into kind of community events and things like that. So it's the second year of it this year. The audiences seem to have been really good. So hopefully it'll just keep building.
Yeah, so is that sort of like your name and you being here would attract other poets and writers?
I guess so, and just some sort of like a validation of something, I think, to a certain extent, or kind of saying, not that it makes it okay if I'm here, but somehow that I can reach out to people on their behalf. I know a lot of the publicists from different publishers and things like that, so that we can kind of have back doors into seeing people and things like that, I guess.
Yeah. What kind of things does it cover then? Has it got like a focus on anything local or?
So it's a real mix. We've got some like nationally renowned authors. Simon Armitage was here last night. Philippa Gregory, the historical novelist. Sally Wainwright, the great TV writer who wrote all the kind of great costume dramas that are on the BBC and ITV, is here, and that's sold out. Last year they had Lem Cisse. So kind of these big names that will always sell out, and then a lot of kind of local writers or writers that have made their home here. I mean, Todmorden and Hebden Bridge is like some sort of nucleus of writing talent somehow, like just attracts people from the nation, I think. And also kind of global stuff, like on Wednesday there's a Poetry in the Holocaust event, which is really important, I think. So last year there was a kind of Viking poetry event that 150 people went to, which was kind of baffling to me. It's amazing, this kind of full space. So it's programmed incredibly generously, I think. There's a lot of family events, and so it's not just to focus on kind of big names or getting politicians or kind of celebs in. There are some big names, but that's a way of kind of funding a lot of the kind of grassroots work that I think is going on.
Do we know what sort of numbers are expected to attend over the 9 or 10 days?
Oh, I don't, off the top of my head. Someone from the festival will, hopefully. I know that that theatre, the Hippodrome, holds 460-something people, and that's definitely sold out for one of the events. And we've got over 400 people in for the headline gigs, and kind of filling that space, which is great because it's a community-run venue in Todmorden. But so, you know, it would be in the pushing past into 5 figures, I think, at least.
That's good. So what would you think then with those numbers that does for the area in general?
It brings people into the cafes, it brings people into the pubs, into the B&Bs and stuff like that. I was staying in a B&B last night that was kind of way out this town centre because everything was full. And it begins to mark Todmorden out as a kind of space that people would come to for literature. I think Todmorden's often felt slightly hard done by Hebden, which is kind of nationally renowned as a kind of like artistic centre and things like that, and it's very bohemian, and Todmorden has often felt, I think, slightly kind of maligned by that. Whereas this just puts it in the centre. It gets people into the Hippodrome, this community-run venue that otherwise would probably have to close down. And it brings people, hopefully from Manchester, from these Leeds, from these big urban centres. You know, oftentimes we think of people travelling from Todd to those places for culture. The idea of a festival like this is that people come in to here, and Todmorden's uniquely placed in that it's kind of in between Manchester, Leeds, Burnley. You know, it kind of occupies the central part of the valley where everything kind of converges. So the hope is that people begin to see it as a destination. They maybe stay a bit longer, they have a wander around, they explore and things like that, and they just spend more time here.
Yeah. So you've had an event of your own as well?
Yeah.
What does your workshop consist of?
Yeah, so we just kind of build it really as like a masterclass, really. So just doing different poetic techniques, exercises, reading some poems, and just discussing ideas, really. Like, I think workshops are just a great space to discuss ideas. It was the first time we've tried it at the festival. Last year we didn't have any workshops. This year there's 2 sold-out workshops, myself and a novelist that's doing one. And it's just a great way to get people involved. So you're not just a passive audience member. You can get involved as a writer, and there's already such a great tradition of writing in Todd. It seems, it seems obvious that we would kind of tap into that, I think.
Yeah. Do you do workshops outside of the festival?
Yes, I mean, I teach full time, so my time is often taken up by that at Manchester Met. Yeah, the writing school at Man Met.
Is that I was just going to ask.
Yeah, that's the writing school.
That's what you do there.
That's what I do there. So I teach a lot of undergrad, postgrad stuff. But yeah, like oftentimes at festivals and things like that, often doing day masterclasses. It's a way of getting out and just kind of meeting writers. And you know, today I talked about a poem that I'd only read 2 days ago for the first time, and I was just excited by it. And it's a chance to go, God, I love this. I don't know why, but I do. Let's talk about that. And it's a chance to kind of have those conversations, I think.
Yeah. So Tell us a little bit more about what you do at the university then.
Yeah, so I'm senior lecturer in creative writing is the official title. So I do a lot of MA teaching of reading contemporary poetry. I teach across some undergraduate units just about getting people to engage with contemporary poetry, really. And I manage a lot of the research stuff now at the university, so kind of thinking about how we frame creativity as research. So, people understand scientific research. So I found this new cell and I've cured this disease. People understand that. We're beginning to get more understanding about writing as a process of research, so that me writing a poem about masculinity leads to new knowledge about masculinity in the same way that discovering a cell leads to new knowledge. And so a lot of my work at the minute is trying to frame what we might mean by that kind of creativity as practice, as creative practice.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting way to look at it. Are there any industry publications or magazines that you read and you'd recommend?
I think the Bookseller website is amazing, just to see what I think you can subscribe to their actual thing as well. Their magazine. But it's just great to see kind of what's going on in the world, and especially things around, quite nerdish things around book sales and things like that, but also just about who's been published where. Every sort of 6 months there's sort of Frankfurt Book Fair, and there's another book fair where people sell, where somehow everything gets sold. So every sort of 6 months there's this massive flurry of, such and such has brought this new book, and it's just interesting to get an insight into that world that otherwise is quite mystified, about kind of how books get sold internationally, who buys them, how are they bought. The Bookseller has been a great education for me because it's something I knew nothing about.
I read an article on there a couple of days ago about pre-order sales in the pre-order industry.
Yeah.
How they contribute to day one.
Yeah.
Sales.
So when you see people obsessively plug in pre-order my book, it's because they want to be in the top 10 Times bestseller list. And it is
you have like a 6-month campaign.
Yeah, and to get into the hardback fiction bestseller list, you need only sell about 1,500 copies, because nobody really buys hardback fiction. Everyone waits for the paperback. And so if you can really push that, if they put enough money behind it. I mean, it's also interesting, the thing that it did make me realise as well is that sometimes you see books get insane marketing campaigns, and you think, what the hell, like posters on the tube and things like that.
That Margaret Atwood one recently is
that Margaret Atwood one, which was bonkers.
I was in Amsterdam middle of September, and it was all over there as well.
And it's because it's entirely linked to how much money they've paid the author to write the book, so they have to recoup their advance. And so, like, when you see a book with now every time I see a book with like a massive marketing campaign, I just think they paid them 6-figure advances, because otherwise they wouldn't be trying to flog it as much. And so it's stuff like that where you sort of demystify the process of it and go, that book's got posters on the tube because they probably gave them 150 grand.
Yeah.
And they desperately want to make that back.
Do you write for any of those magazines and stuff like that, the industry magazines?
I do a bit of writing for, they're actually a really useful handbook, I think, which is the Writers and Artists Yearbook. That comes out every year.
I meant to order that. Yeah.
It's really great. So it's got kind of various articles, and I've done some about like poetry. But at the back, it's just got a list of every agent and what they look for and things like that, and like contact details. So it's just a great kind of industry bible in a way, and that's something that I really recommend. And other than that, I just tend to review for like The Guardian and things like that, just as a way of kind of keeping.
Pieces.
If they ask me, just to kind of keep the conversation going, really.
Yeah. What's next for you then? What are you?
Oh God.
What's coming up next? In fact, you spoke about you wrote a thing recently, a play.
Yeah, so I wrote this play that toured, and that was really fun. That's just finished now. And then the next thing probably is
what are you working on now instead of next?
Yeah, non-fiction that hopefully my agent might be able to sell next week. So maybe by the time you listen to this podcast, it'll be officially a thing in the world. So the idea is that we might sell it hopefully soon, and then I'll finish writing it next year.
Yeah, well, we'll have to have another chat about that.
Yeah, have to have another chat when it comes out.
So the last couple now, more like quick fire things before we wrap up. What kind of books do you read?
I try and read everything. I try and read across a wide range of poetry, including stuff I don't like. I don't write every day. I think that's a myth. I don't know anyone that writes every day. I'm jealous of people that do. But I try to do something connected to it every day. So read something or kind of think about something. I end up reading a lot of contemporary fiction because I get sent a lot of it to Blurb now. So that tends to be my two things, kind of contemporary poetry, contemporary fiction, and more trying to just understand the world. I try and listen to a lot of political podcasts and read a lot of kind of political memoir, just to try and fathom what the fuck's happening in the world. Sorry, that was swear.
No, you're allowed.
That's all right.
What are you reading now?
At the minute, I've just been sent. There was a novel came out a couple of years ago called What Belongs to You by Garth Greenwell that did really well, a kind of queer Henry James-esque novel set in like Eastern Europe, and he's just written a follow-up to that, or kind of a somehow sequel to that. So they've just sent me that. That's coming out in April next year, which I'm excited about. And that's what I'm carrying around with me at the minute.
Yeah. What book do you gift or recommend the most?
The book I always recommend is this one. There's actually vintage a reissue in it next year called The Man Who Fell in Love with the Moon by Tom Spanbauer. And it's this amazing kind of queer Western, strange novel that nobody ever reads, but I love it. And Vintage, I've just written the introduction to it. Vintage are going to republish it in January 2020, which is exciting. So hopefully that's going to find a new readership. But I always give that to people and they always don't particularly enjoy it, but are grateful that I gave it them.
Yeah. You got any social media you want to shout out?
Twitter is at Andrew Poetry, which is quite easy. Or just check out my website, and that's often got the dates of kind of readings and things like that.
All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.
And there we have it, and that was genuinely one of my favourite episodes, probably my favourite episode so far to record. It was really fascinating to meet Andrew, and he has recently written a play which finished touring just before our interview, and hopefully his agent will be able to sell a non-fiction book to a publisher the week after we did this interview, so there'll be an update hopefully on that in the coming weeks. Hopefully I'll get him back on for another chat to promote that. So make sure you follow Andrew on Twitter at Andrew Poetry. Check out his collections. I'll put a link in the description and show notes. You can also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at abfrank to keep up with the books that I'm reading and the book that I'm writing. And I'll put a link into previous episodes which you can check out as well. See you in the next one.